Welcome everyone to this new session. This is day 12 and we are focusing on our intermediate model. All right. This is where you begin to get all some of the juicy components you need to be able to do your work. All right. So let's focus on the use case, and when we focus on the use case here, we're only basically using this as a model, and then you can, use that in your own project. All right. So the use case here is that sales analytics needs a reliable way to compute effective line item discount rate while preventing divide by zero errors. And they want to ensure customer records always contain an email by providing a fallback value. They also require a standardized placeholder when other comments are missing to so downstream's reporting remains consistent. All right, so basically what they are looking for here, and then before we go into the solution, action here is to deliver an enriched transactional data set with self discount metrics. Now we do have the sample data here, so you can feel free to look at it and the data that is needed. Now let's assume we don't have the sample data. How do we solve this problem? So basically, when you look at this, you first of all look at the template we used to follow. What table are we looking for here, and then what are the attributes, any filters we need to be concerned with, and so on. So if you look at here, you can see we're talking about line item discount rate. That quickly tells us that we're looking at the order detail. All right, and then there are some key things we want to keep in mind there. We want to prevent division by zeros, very key to take note. And also we want to make sure that email, there is no blank email. We also want to fall back to a particular value. In this case, we will check with the business what they want, but in our case, we're just going to use unknown as the company domain name. And then here they also want to make sure that comment also doesn't just have nulls, but here they have no values, but here they want to also have a default value. Okay, so that's really what, and there is really no filter, but mostly we're going to have some derived columns. Okay, and so that's really what we want to focus on here. So now, just before we go further, let's quickly look at the data model and see how we'll make our way. Okay, guys, just pay attention. So yeah, we're going to be focusing on this particular object. Okay, now, but however, there are some key components that we'll need in this particular table. So we're going to make our way up to this table. Why? Because we'll need the email address. Remember, we have the email address in that particular use case, and also along the line we'll be able to pull this customer ID. We'll be able to pull some attribute here as well. So that's really how the join is going to make its way. Now that's just to give us a good idea. So we'll just go ahead and continue with the solution. Okay, guys. All right, so let's go to our lab. All right, now let's quickly, you know how we like to start. Let's start with just select star and look at what our table look like, and then we can start picking and selecting the columns that we actually need. So this is a tip. No, this is not the one that we need. We need the order details. So we're just going to let's go to the order detail. I believe it's somewhere here, so I'm going to drop that in. Let's run that. Beautiful guys. So now let's quickly look at this. What are the things that we need here? Okay, what are the things that we need here? So basically, yeah, we will need the unit price for sure. So let's pull in the unit price. So let's quickly pull in the unit price. All right, and also let's pull in the unit price discount. Okay, all right, so let's pull in the unit price discount. Also here we're gonna also need excuse me, so we're also going to need the product ID. So now those are the three main attributes we need here. Also we need to just, let's call this debt. So let's align it with that. We already know this from all of our previous sessions, so we're just gonna because we're gonna have multiple tables like I explained in the data model, so we're just gonna have it properly referenced. Okay, so let's run this now. Beautiful guys, this is great job. Now the first thing we want to introduce here is what we call the null if, and I'm going to explain that quickly. So null if, what it does, you can see here that we have 0, right? Now what if we don't, because if you have to divide something by 0, you know that will be an error, and we're gonna see that. But if we want to replace this 0 with something else, how do we do that? For example, no value, and no value in this SQL system, it's really null. Okay, so let's quickly do that. So we're gonna say wherever you see 0, replace with null. Okay, 0 replace with null. Okay, we call this unit price discount updated. Okay, all right, so let's run that. Beautiful. You can see how this really works. You see, basically you look at this column, and wherever I see 0, replace with null. This is great, guys. Now let's look at some use cases here. Now let's first calculate what we call the net unit price. And what does that look like? So basically that would look like the unit price, okay, and then multiply, okay, another bracket, and then you will have 1 minus the unit price discount. Okay, right, and then that's really it. So basically, for example, here you have 1 minus 0, and then 1 multiplied by unit price. Obviously it's going to be the same, but there are cases where you have values here, then it tells you the exact, you know, the net price, in other words the actual unit price after the discount. All right, so we call this net unit price. All right, and then we run that. Beautiful, guys. And then you can double check. I know here you has just seen 0, but you can also double check. Let's say double check to make sure that what we did is correct. We can say where unit price is not 0, right? And then let's run that. Beautiful. So you can see when you unit price discount is not 0, you can see this is 0.02, so it's going to do 1 minus 0.02 and multiply by this. So you can see this is 1971, 1972. So it's working quite well. So we're going to just comment this out. We don't need to have any filter in. So this is good. This is good. So now let's look at another use case where we can actually use the NULLIF here, which is we're trying to understand really clearly here. So we're going to have what we call a discount rate, and the way the discount rate works is going to be unit price discount, okay, and we're going to say divided by unit price, okay, and then we're going to call this discount rate. Okay, all right, so now when you do this, you see wherever you have 0, it's basically returning 0. So we have 0 divided by this is basically returning 0. Now this kind of work well, but this is not really fail proof. What do we mean by that? So essentially, let's assume that the discount rate, we're going to turn this around, and just to prove a point, right, let's assume that the discount rate was actually unit price. All right, just to prove a point, okay, over this, right, and then we'll call this discount rate just for test. Okay, now the reason why I say it's not fail proof is that I see it's going to give you an error. You see, it said division by 0, right, and there are cases where you would actually have this. For example, if this unit price as 0, you will have run into this 0. So how do we make sure that it's fail proof? Now what we need to do is to add NULLIF. So when you add NULLIF, you now say when unit price is actually 0, return null, right? And the same thing here, we had null if here, and you say when this is actually 0, return null. So what then end up happening is that the division by 0 is being taken care of. So if you do a test again, you see it just works. You can see that. So it's replacing it with no value. So therefore it knows, the computer or the engine knows how to really calculate that. So because of that, we're just going to quickly introduce that here. Actually, what we can do is to copy this here, so that will save some time. So that we used to replace that, and then we copy this here as well, and then we use this to replace this. Okay, and this one is actually fail proof, right? So this is a good design. All right, so we just comment that out, and this is great. This is great, guys. Great job. And then we then need to introduce something else. They mentioned that the comment, we need to pull the comment, and when you see the comment is in this table, sales order header, so we need to pull that table. So let's do a quick left outer join to this table. Okay, so we're going to do a left outer join to this table, and we're going to call it add. Okay, and then we're going to do on, and we know how, if you've been following us so far, you will know how this is connected, but I can quickly show you. Just they connect through the sales order ID. So we do sales order ID equals to that dot sales order ID. All right, guys, and then with that we can easily then pull our comment, say add dot comment. All right, and we want to introduce a new concept here. So you can see some comment null, and you'll see some that has value. Actually, let's see if we see anyone that has value here. No, but we can quickly check for that. So we'll make sure that some of them have values. We'll say where add dot count is not null. Okay, so let's quickly run that, and then we should be able to, so we don't have, so most of our add comment is null. Okay, but that's fine. So what we're gonna do is that we're just gonna replace it, because it will still help us to drive or to understand the concept I'm trying to introduce here, which is coalescence. So coalescence, the way it works is that it also works with null, and this is why it's key to differentiate between null and blank, and we've gone through this in another section. Okay, so now what we are saying is that wherever you see null, replace with what we call no comment. Okay, and then we'll call this as comment modified. Okay, and let's run that. So basically what I'm saying here is that when you have this, just return no comment. So essentially what it's going to be looking for is whenever we have null, and it's interpreting null as no value, and it say, okay, whenever we have null, replace with no comment. This is key, right? And this is what they expect from that use case. The other one they expect is the email address. So we need to pull the email address, from the person table. So we're going to do a couple of joins here. I know some of you, if you've been following us, you'll have seen this join before, but we're going to do it again just to be able to reinforce the knowledge. And here we're going to first pull the customer. Okay, we're going to do that quickly. Call this cost, and then we'll say on, and then we'll say cost dot customer ID. I think we should have that somewhere here. Should have customer ID somewhere here. Beautiful. Equals to head dot customer ID. Awesome, guys. And then we're gonna then do another like join to person. I'm just gonna copy this to person dot person. Okay, we'll call this P, and then we have on equals to P dot person ID equals to cost dot person ID, and then with that we can pull couple of fields. So we're gonna start with we're going to first pull the head dot sales order ID. Let's quickly, I think we can actually quickly just pull that here. And also we're going to pull the order date as well. Dot order date, so they can know when those orders happen. And then we're also going to pull the customer ID. We're going to do customer ID. Let's quickly do that. And lastly, we're then going to pull the email address. Okay, so let me just put a comma here. We're going to pull an email address. Okay, so email address is going to be in P email address. Okay, and let's run all of that. That should work perfectly well. You can see we have duplicate as expected, because at this point it's at the product level, sales product line level. So because of that, that's why we're having this duplicate, so it's expected. All right, so now one last thing we need to do is that we need to do this coalescence also around the email address, because if we don't have any email address, in this case we do have we do have, most of the time we have an email address for each of the customer. So basically, but if we don't, how do we want to make sure that it's really fail proof, or it means the use case? So we're going to then put a default value here. So I'm basically going to copy this, and then we're just going to replace that with so we're going to replace with something like unknown, and then we just close the bracket, and we can call this as email address. All right, so anywhere we don't have, there is no value for email address, then it return this value. All right, this is great, guys, and that's really all that we needed. And we can just order by, if you want to double check with that sample data, order by 1 in descending order, and then you run that, and then you should be able to see, if you look at this value, for example, 232259688, so 68. So if you look at this 232359226868, you can see everything works perfectly well. Well, guys, thank you for watching. That is where we're gonna stop for today. I hope you are really getting excited. This is really awesome, and thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next session.